Hey guys, welcome back. Glad you joined us for today's episode. We're in 2 Kings chapter 15, and we're going to talk about two good kings in a row. Can you believe it? Two in a row. Let's talk about Jotham today.
Welcome to Everyday Truth with Kurt Skelly. We believe the Bible is true and relevant to everyone, everywhere, every day. If today's conversation is a help to you, take a moment to leave a review or share it with a friend. Thanks for listening. Now, let's join Kurt for today's episode.
Hey friends, welcome back. Good to have you back on the podcast today. We're in 2 Kings chapter 15, and we're going to talk about a southern king by the name of Jotham today. Jotham actually was the son of Uzziah. And remember, Uzziah reigned for 52 years. Although he had some pride at the end of his life and contracted leprosy because of that pride, the real length of his ministry and his reign was good. And the Bible gives the overall estimation of his ministry as doing that which is right in the sight of the Lord. And it's interesting because Jotham, his son, follows in his footsteps. That's always great to see. It's rare to see, unfortunately, among the kings, but it's great to see when a father has that kind of influence upon a son. And I guess the question might be, why don't we see that more often in the story of the kings? Well, in the northern kingdom, we've seen it. There's been idolatry, there's been betrayal, there has been a wholesale departure from God, from his word, from his worship, from all of it. So that's not hard to figure out in the northern kingdom, just why things have gone so badly. But in the southern kingdom, these are the sons of David. Think about it. Their great-great-great-grandfather is the sweet psalmist of Israel, David. And some of these kings have been just as wicked as can be, and others seem to rediscover the law, rediscover worshiping God, and Uzziah is one of them. So why don't we see more consistency generationally among these kings of Judah? One of the reasons might be that the kings had multiple wives in many cases, and the attention that an individual father gave his son often was not the kind of attention that God would have expected. We look at Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4, for instance. It is the father's responsibility to bring up his children in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord, the character training and the word training that every son needs. Sons need godly fathers. That's the bottom line. That's the way God designed it. Sons need godly fathers. And it's wonderful here that Jotham is following the godly example of his father Uzziah, even though Uzziah made some bad mistakes at the end of his life. But it's sad that so many of the Judean kings do not have that testimony. And even Jotham himself will not have that testimony because his son Ahaz ends up being a very wicked man. So let's look at Jotham's story. The greater part of his story is told in 2 Chronicles. But here in verse 32, in the second year of Pekah, so he is now the ruler in the northern kingdom, wicked man. In the second year of Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, began Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, to reign. So Uzziah has died. Jotham and Uzziah have actually reigned together for a period of time because Uzziah cannot fulfill his office as king as a leper. So Jotham and Uzziah had some co-regency. They co-reigned. But now Uzziah is dead and Jotham is reigning. 25 years old was he when he began to reign. He reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jerusha, the daughter of Zadok. Interesting how often the Bible mentions the mother. And the reason for that is because oftentimes kings, as I said, would have multiple sons by multiple women. And God never intended that. Look at the qualifications that God outlined for the king back in Deuteronomy chapter 17. And God specifically said that he is not to proliferate wives to himself, and yet many of them did. So often when you want to distinguish a son, you call him by the name of his mother. And what I have to believe is that Jerusha was a godly woman. And although we don't know much about her or really anything about her, she's mentioned, and Jotham is mentioned as a godly man. And we know that a son or a child, the lion's share of the time often is spent with mom. And so this Jerusha, no doubt, is a woman who loves the Lord. He did that which was right in the sight of the Lord. He did according to all that his father Uzziah had done. So doing right in God's sight and following the pattern of dad. So both of those statements are important because doing right is a matter of doing right in the sight of the Lord. What does that mean? That means doing right on the inside because God's sight pierces beyond the outside. He sees our heart. And that also means doing right when no one else is watching, because when you're all alone, there God is looking as well. So doing right in the sight of the Lord is one part of this, but then the Bible says walking in the ways of his father. So he had a good pattern. He had the ability to follow a man whose priorities and schedule and works were followable. So that's a good template for all sons, that they would be taught that their ultimate accountability is to God, but that they would have a good pattern to know what serving God looks like, what following God looks like in flesh and blood. And so Jotham had that in his dad, Uzziah. Howbeit, the high places were not removed. And this is a statement that's been made now about the last 3 or 4 kings. The people sacrificed and burnt incense still in the high places. It was just an element of compromise. But the Bible goes on to say that Jotham built the higher gate of the house of the Lord. In fact, if you'll read the parallel passage in 2 Chronicles, you'll read that Jotham really had a heart for the house of God. And he repaired it, refurbished it, paid attention to it. And that's an important thing. The house of God was the place literally where God met man in those days. So more than a church building, it was a physical spot where God chose to meet man on earth. That's why people prayed toward Jerusalem. That's why Jerusalem was the place to which people should come 3 times a year for the feasts. And so Jotham saw the importance of the presence of God and honoring God and the house of God. It says in verse 36, now the rest of the acts of Jotham, all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? In those days, 2 more verses. In those days, the Lord began to send against Judah Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah. Let me give you a bit of that background. So what's happening, as we've already learned, is that Assyria is becoming a great and mighty nation, a world nation. And Assyria is beginning to dominate and intimidate all the nations around her, including Syria. So Assyria is the bigger nation and is dominating Syria, which would be a border to Assyria, which would be modern day Iraq, and the northern kingdom. So Syria and the northern kingdom have allied themselves together to stave off the attacks and the invasion of the Assyrians. But they realize that they're not strong enough. So what they're doing is trying to apply pressure on Jotham. So what is the strategy of Syria? What is the strategy of the northern kingdom, Israel? Their strategy is, when we're faced with trouble, we need to get human help. We need to get more alliances. We need to stack up more resources. Now, is it wrong to get alliances with other people or stack up resources or prepare an army? None of those things are wrong in and of themselves. The point here, though, is that they're not looking to God, especially Pekah and the northern kingdom. This is God's nation still, and they're not looking to God, and they're trying to apply pressure on the good man Jotham to join them. And it says specifically in verse 38, and Jotham, where are we? Verse number 37. In those days, the Lord began to send against Judah. And that's the part I wanted to read. I think I did read it, but I kind of glossed over it. The point here is that it appears to Jotham that Rezin and Pekah are calling the shots and putting the pressure on and establishing this coalition. But really what we see by the verse is that God is in control. And even though this would have been a bad decision for Jotham, God nonetheless is in control of the situation. And Jotham slept with his fathers, was buried with his fathers in the city of David, his father, and Ahaz. Don't forget that name. It's easy because Ahaz is so close to Ahab, and they're both bad guys. And Ahaz, his son, reigned in his stead. We're going to learn a little bit about this man, Ahaz. In fact, if you want to do some extra reading, read the very famous Isaiah chapter 7, Isaiah chapter 8, Isaiah 7, that should be familiar to you because Isaiah 7:14, virgin shall conceive, bring forth a son, Emmanuel, right? That's the prophecy of the virgin birth. Well, that was given during the reign of Ahaz, who also is going to receive pressure from these men. We'll talk more about that next episode. So that's it for today. Thanks for joining us again for yet another episode. We'll see you next time. God bless you, my friends.